want Detroit sports talk done right? Yeah! If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's Tuesday, December 28th, 2021. It's, the middle of the holidays. It's post-Christmas, but pre-New Year's. But that also means it's the return of the Knee Jerks Detroit Sports Talk of Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al, the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things, has the cutest dog on both sides of the Mississippi, and I think he has a cold cocktail waiting for him at the end of the show. That would be Greg Eno. How's things, Greg?
Either that or I'm going to be cold-cocked, one of the two. Thanks, Al, for that. You know, we weren't with you. I'm talking to the audience now. We weren't with you. We weren't with you on December 14th. I had some stuff going on in my personal life, so we took that week off. So Al and I haven't been with you since November 30th. So there's lots to talk about in the world of sports, as you can imagine, having happened since then. But I am happy to be with Al and with you. You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter, of course, at the Knee Jerks. And please read my WordPress Out of Bounds blog every Monday. Generally, there's some new content. My recent article is about Dylan Larkin and how he's kind of shutting me up anyway in terms of criticism that I had about him heading into the season, and he's performed very well so far. So I wrote about him. We've got, like I said, lots of goings on the plate here because we've been gone for so long, and there are lots of things going on.
Yes.
Anyway, on top of that. But before we get to anything that Al has on his plate, let's play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I'll give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll receive a bunch of TV dinners from Libby the Kid.
Libby the Kid, that I have vague memories of that. Very, very, very vague. Probably for good reason, to be honest with you.
Consider yourself, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm sure one of them will be Salisbury steak, I'm sure.
Oh, God, no kidding. Okay, this person, Al, made his name in the world of hockey. He was born on this date in 1929. Sadly, is no longer with us and died quite young, actually. Mm-hmm. Universally heralded as one of the best ever at his position, I will tell you that. Played for, of course, since he played in the original 6 days, one of the teams he played for, of course, was the Red Wings, and he played for them for quite some time and on a couple different occasions. And I will tell you that he was a Calder Trophy winner, which, of course, is given to the Rookie of the Year. And I think I'll stop right there.
I'm just going to take a guess. And when you throw in died young, so I'm going to throw in Terry Sawchuk.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, if you hadn't have said died young, I might have had a few. I might have had to wait another question or two. But yeah, he died tragically young, too young.
Absolutely, 40 years old. Just a horrible accident. Just an odd way to die. Just terrible. Wrestling around with teammate Ron Stewart, and then I think they tumbled into a barbecue grill or something, and Sawchuk got his side punctured or something weird, like they went to the hospital. It wasn't thought to be a deadly accident when it happened, but he went to the hospital and never got better. And I think he had some other issues. Was he not a heavy drinker, or am I making that up?
That I couldn't tell you for sure, but would it be any kind of surprise that a hockey player of that era drank too much? Probably not.
So he went to the hospital, never came out, and so he died on May 31st, 1970. Ron Stewart was who I always felt bad for, by the way, because that was just just one of those things. I mean, I think they were having some sort of a disagreement about end of the month phone bill or something. Yeah. Got into a wrestling match, and that happened. So Sawchuk, who was probably one of the more he was a very interesting guy, as you know, Al, very morose, very oftentimes depressed, not a very happy guy for the most part. He just
doesn't that kind of fit the MO for goalies? There are always seem to be a little off kilter, especially in that era when you're playing without a mask.
Right. He got traded to the Bruins by the Red Wings, and he hated it there. He had depression. He had anxiety attacks. The Boston fans got on him, and he hated it in Boston. Almost quit hockey entirely. Played for the Red Wings 3 different occasions, actually. So good. So you get the Libby the Kid, and the tagline now was Libby the Kid. It's Billy the Kid spelled backwards, almost. That was the tagline.
Oh boy, I can't wait to stock up on Salisbury steak and. God, what would be the other go-to? They always had some sort of apple thing, baked apple thing in one, and the greeny mashed potatoes. Trust me, people, if you didn't grow up with, which were at the time, TV meals were like the height of technology, so to speak. Like, oh my God, a meal all in one, and you just have to put it in the oven and.
Right.
Oh, but as a kid, you eat sucky food. Today, I can't remember the last time I even had any sort of microwave oven TV dinner, even like a pot pie or anything like that, which was another go-to when I was a kid, or at least just shut me up. Yeah, I'll just make a pot pie, so, if you don't want to eat liver. So. Anyway, all right, let's get I'll make room in the freezer for that, and now we need to move on to the show. As Greg said, we had a lot to talk about, but really seems to be dominating it's like this overarching cloud covering everything in life. Our personal lives, our work lives, our sports entertainment, everything we watch is being affected by COVID, and specifically the new variant of Omicron. And right now, everyone and everything, and it's more than especially sports, are being adversely affected by this new variant. And sports, in a lot of ways, Greg, has really been the canary in the coal mine when you think about it, because what's going on, especially in the NHL and the NBA, is absolutely, I won't say bonkers, but it's unprecedented. We'll put it that way. Even because, we'll get into this. Right now, Greg, the NHL is on a complete hiatus. They shut the entire league down, just because they were starting to have to postpone game after game. I think the Wings had a couple of games postponed before they actually shut the league down, and then the Wings are supposed to play tomorrow night. And that game's been postponed because of COVID still. The Wings have lost several players, and I think Jeff Blashill, for example, just got out of the COVID protocols. They've missed several players and coaches to COVID. The NHL has actually pulled out of the Winter Olympics in China for obvious reasons. One of the biggest being, if you came down with COVID in China, you are there for 5 weeks of quarantine at least. And could you picture, say, a Dylan Larkin or a Sidney Crosby or Alex Ovechkin being stuck in China for 2 months? Because they got sick to compete in the Olympics. And even though players are kind of upset about this, because this is the second straight Olympics they're going to miss, it's a very, very, very understandable. I would not want to be traveling out of the country right now, let alone freaking China. The NBA, Greg, has over 100 players in protocol, but they are trying to play through this surge regardless. The Pistons had one game postponed. They have lost literally half their roster and several of their coaches to COVID protocols. Either I don't know. We don't know if they're symptomatic, asymptomatic, if they're positive, whatever, or just showing symptoms. But again, the NBA decided to push through. So right now, the Pistons are unwatchable right now because their team right now, their rotation is essentially, I think, 3 regular guys, and then the rest of it's either G Leaguers and 10-day contract guys. And I believe the NBA has changed the quarantine protocol from, I think, 10 to 6 days. The NFL has done something very similar, that they're reducing protocols from 10 to 5. That got announced today. Many teams are battling these same issues. The Lions have, for example. They didn't have Jared Goff this past Sunday. It seems like every day another player comes out. As one player comes off the COVID protocol, another is coming on. I know they lost the tight end today, as a matter of fact. And, of course, the NFL has had to move some games around like they did last year. We've had a Monday doubleheader. We had a Tuesday game, of all things. But they're just trying to power through, and it's understandable why, because of the money at stake. But I think the NHL, Greg, I think did the right thing. Shut things down for a week. Try and get ahead of things a little bit. Make sure to get people treated the way they need to get treated. Figure out your protocols, and then come back strong. I can see why the NBA and the NFL are doing what they're doing as well, just because the Omicron variant seems to be far, at least what we know so far, seems to be far more contagious, but maybe not as lethal. So I don't know. I tend to fall. Then again, I'm someone who is fully vaccinated and boosted, but because one of the biggest reasons why, because I am immune compromised, and then my girlfriend is an ER nurse who's been through hell for the past 2 years. So I really tend to fall on the side of caution, like the NHL has. So I do have some issues with how the NBA and NFL are handling things, but this is looking more and more like this may be going on indefinitely, Greg, just because of how this thing is mutating, how people are treating the pandemic at this point, and the massive, massive, massive amounts of money at stake for these leagues that they have to power through.
They look at South with the Omicron variant. They've been looking at South Africa as a bellwether, and they kind of are taking the tack of what so goes South Africa, so might go the rest of the world.
Right.
And actually, some of the reports I've seen from South Africa are kind of positive in the sense that they're kind of thinking that this variant, while it does spread like wildfire, seems to have peaked really quickly, also seems to be crashing, at least in what I've heard from South Africa.
Burning itself out, as they would say.
That it's one of these things that it hits you hard, not physically hard, because it is supposed to be a little bit less severe, actually quite a bit less severe than the Delta variant, for example. But that the numbers, do look initially very bad, and then it just they're already seeing it kind of nosedive in South Africa.
Yeah.
The folks that I listen to, the Faucis of the world and other people like that, are taking the tack of, you got to keep your guard up, but at the same time, boosted people like you and I are that will do a lot better with this, and that it does seem to be causing very less severe symptoms and problems for people in terms of
like I've said, it's kind of like a ladder, as to say, if you're boosted, it's going to be like a case of the flu, and if you're not boosted, it's going to be a little worse. If you've had the Johnson & Johnson, it's going to be even worse. And if you're unvaccinated, well, you could very well end up in the hospital.
Sure.
And I hear straight from the horse's mouth. Trust me, that I have two loved ones that are ER nurses, and they're saying the vast majority of people they've seen end up in the hospital and being admitted, especially, are all unvaccinated. And that really what it comes down to. If these players are vaccinated, which the vast majority of them are, I think, if you look at every pro sport, it's up around 98% or something like that, at least between the big three that are playing right now. And you don't hear anybody getting.
Are they boosted though? Do you know?
That's the other thing. We always have to figure out, are they boosted, or and then we have this stupid stuff like don't get me going on the Nets allowing Kyrie Irving to come back to play, essentially because they ran out of players and said, well, we're going to go against everything we said 3 months ago and bring this guy back, and that might end up being my jerk of the week. But there are so many variants. I'm not even talking about the virus itself, but how this plays out. As you said, are these people got the booster or not? Are they? What type of vaccine have they had? What kind of exposures are they dealing with? And so that really this still feels like kind of like the wild, wild west is what we're learning with this. We're learning something new every day, and we'll get into it, how it's affecting colleges as well. But but still, sometimes we were getting Like today, I read that Brad Marchand. What a surprise! That we all know how much well-liked Brad Marchand is. He said it should be up to the players to play in the Olympics, but he played was not making any money for the NHL card, so they're not going to do. They didn't want us to go anyway. And I'm thinking that's what with some of these guys you get. I don't want to give them the benefit of the doubt with some of these opinions they're throwing out there, because think about it. Flying 16 hours to China, being overseas, we have a variant of this highly contagious disease that's even more contagious. And if you do contract it over in China, you are stuck there for who knows how god long. I'm never siding with NHL on owners on anything of any pro sport. I'm siding with the owners of this, because this is common fucking sense that not to travel to China in the middle of a pandemic with this with a variant running crazy. So when I hear stuff like that, and then you hear how Kyrie Irving is being allowed to play again, and and Todd Bertuzzi, who came down with COVID and still says, I'm not going to get vaccinated no matter what happens. And this is why we're still in this 2 years later, because of these kind of attitudes. And it's just my mind is boggled at this point with some of these opinions I'm seeing out there.
Yeah, well, no, I mean that's a podcast in and of itself. But
it would be, wouldn't it?
Back to what you were saying about the NHL. Yeah, the NHL typically kind of treats the holidays as kind of hallowed ground anyway. They typically don't play. They don't allow any transactions.
Yeah, it's a very light schedule.
Yeah, they don't let people get traded during certain times of that time frame and so forth. So they doing this at this time, it wasn't unusual, but I think that it was a smart. It was smart because we'll cancel some games now or postpone them, meaning that they could still be made up later.
Right.
We'll see how this thing goes. And then we'll reevaluate. Now, that's not a lot of time. I get it. In the whole scheme of things, that's not a lot of time to let things, it's certainly not going to blow over in that time frame. But it was prudent. It was worth a shot to try to maybe avoid further breakdown. I think what's just going to have to happen, Al, and this is what we're seeing with the Pistons with signing these 10-day contracts and so forth.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to leagues are going to have to just be kind of loosey-goosey when it comes to roster limitations, sizes.
Yeah, like the NHL is brought back the taxi squad, for example.
Right, exactly. You're just going to have to kind of throw the old rules out the window for now and just kind of, if you're going to want to get games not canceled or you want to get enough – but it's tricky because what you don't want to do, Al, what you don't want to do is you don't want teams – to put a product, whether it's on the ice or on the court or whatever, that is dramatically inferior to what they normally would have. But yet at the same time, I understand the unwillingness to postpone or cancel games. And the other thing, too, which hasn't been talked about that much yet, although it is starting to creep into the discussion now in terms of other aspects of life, not sports related, is live audiences now.
Right.
What are we going to do about crowds at these venues? Obviously the focus right now is on the players, but what are we going to do about the paying customers? Will there be a return to a more a bubble type arrangement?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see that. I understand, but that's something that's going to have to be kind of talked about. But as far as it is a little bit disconcerting to see games postponed and canceled, but I'm personally taking some heart in what I'm seeing in terms of how this Omicron is might fizzle out sooner rather than later. Right. I don't think this is going to be something that's going to hang on with us for too much longer. The only question, of course, is even with that, how much damage will it do or how much impact will it have on these schedules? The NHL and the NBA, Al, can always extend their season. This is not.
Well, I think that the cancellation of the Winter Olympics for the NHL players plays into that because now they got like a 2-3 week period to make up games.
Right. Yeah. But if worse came to worse, you could always extend the season. That's not that big of a deal.
That's not unprecedented.
You're right. You can take the games that were missed now and put them later on. I mean, that's all doable. The NBA can do the same thing. Football season is almost over with. Well, I mean, there's still the playoffs and everything, but we're way more toward the end of the season than we are the beginning.
Yeah.
So, that I think will be okay. Spring training in baseball, I don't know. That's up in the air, not because of COVID necessarily, but because of the CBA.
We'll get into that later, exactly.
But I think I know nobody likes to see games postponed and canceled because it's a little bit unnerving to see that. But at the same time,
yes, I want to watch the Sun Bowl.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think we're more equipped, better equipped, much better equipped to handle this now than we were last year before the vaccines came into being. They're way out of this. And I just think that the Omicron variant is, I'm not going to say much ado about nothing because I don't want to take it that lightly, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as I think it's going to taper off pretty quickly. I think the next 6 to 8 weeks will be a little bit.
Right.
I know Michigan.
We'll see what happens after the Christmas break, I think, more than anything else, because we'll have a lot of people gathering in enclosed places. So we'll see what things look like 7 to 14 days from now, or at least after the New Year. And then I know you're right. We'll probably have a much better idea when we hit mid-January. After the holidays have finished up, and I admitted one large family gathering. Now my sister had a. It was going to be mostly her husband's family. He has a pretty large family at their place, and my mother and her husband and my sister decided to go. One of my other sisters decided to go, and I said, "No, I'm going to back out on this one. I don't want to be in a house of 25 people right now." It just seemed like a prudent thing to do, and I'm glad. And they understood. I've been cautious for 2 years at this point. I have not come down with COVID, and I want to keep it that way, even though I've dodged a couple bullets with Linda getting it. So it's, like I said, we'll know more in a couple weeks, I think, or 2 to 3 weeks. We'll have an idea where things stand. But I can understand, especially the NFL. You made a good point. The season for them is almost over. They're gonna finish this season hell or high water. If that means, robbing other teams, like the Lions are doing, getting guys off of other teams' practice squads and things like that, then that's exactly what's going to happen. That means
20 teams are done. In 2 weeks, 20 teams are done.
Exactly.
20 teams are finished in 2 weeks. Then you got the 12 playoff teams, so they're going to get through it for sure.
Yeah, but we ought to talk about what's going on with college football right now. It's absolutely crazy. It's literally chaos with the bowl games, it feels like right now. I mean, it seems like every day a game or two is getting canceled, or obviously they're not going to get postponed. They're just going to blow them up. But it feels like every day a game has been canceled, or they're juggling teams because one team is still okay, and yet while their opponent has been blindsided by COVID. And 11 bowls at this point have been canceled. And we're seeing stuff like kind of some oddball stuff like this past couple days. The Sun Bowl was in the news because the CMU, Central Michigan, was in the Arizona Bowl, and the Sun Bowl, which is a bigger deal, nationally televised, more important game, a lot more money. I mean, the Sun Bowl is national broadcast television, I believe. I'm not sure if it's ESPN or CBS at this point. But the Arizona Bowl was streaming only through Barstool, some sort of cheap-ass bowl. But CMU's opponent, I believe, got hit by COVID. Washington State, their opponent, in the Sun Bowl, got hit by COVID. So CMU, we're already in Arizona, and we're eligible. So the Sun Bowl said, we'll be happy to have you. And obviously the Arizona Bowl will get some sort of financial payout and kind of trying to make them good. But this is stuff we've never seen happen before. The Gator Bowl. Texas A&M had to back out of the Gator Bowl because of COVID, and Wake Forest, who's had one of their best seasons in decades, didn't have an opponent. So Rutgers, 5-7 Rutgers, essentially was recruited to play. Supposedly there's analytics that say they're the best 5-7 team that was willing to play. But Rutgers hasn't practiced in a month. They have players scattered all around the country because it's Christmas holidays. Right. Several players won't play because they've either left the team to prepare for the draft or they have entered a transfer portal. But Gator Bowl, big money, nationally televised. It's one of the more prestigious of the flea bag bowls, I guess you want to call it that. They're going to get that game played, so they're going to recruit teams to do it. It's actually, as I was working on the show notes today, Greg, UCLA 4 hours before kickoff. I guess UCLA had been participating in all the events that go with a bowl game, all the personal events and going to an amusement park and stuff. I guess UCLA, the whole team went to the damn. I read that they went to SeaWorld yesterday. They participated in a parade this morning. 4 hours before tonight's kickoff, UCLA pulled out because they had been hit by a shit ton of positive COVID tests. So the Holiday Bowl has been canceled. That was a nationally televised game. So I guess the big thing is how long before it hits one of the teams. There's the 4 college football playoff teams: Michigan, Cincinnati, Alabama, and Georgia. And they're giving themselves no leeway. There are no other options. They say if a team tests COVID, they're going to forfeit. The opponent moves on. For example, so if Michigan can't play because of COVID, they will not postpone the game. Cincinnati will go to the championship game. If the team in the championship game and one of them comes out with COVID, that team's going to win by forfeit and become national champions. If none of the teams can compete, Greg, it's going to be vacant. We'll just have a vacant national title. We are in uncharted waters at this point. So I can understand, especially colleges. I can understand these big universities erring on the side of caution with quote unquote, I tend to say student athletes. So I can even see why these colleges, and for the most part for these schools, these minor bowl games are money losers for them anyway. It's just more about rewarding the players and hoping for some exposure on ESPN. That's where most of these games are. But I can understand colleges, considering what their main purpose is supposed to be, that they are not going to take many chances when it comes to a COVID outbreak. So unlike the NFL, unlike the NBA, NHL, they are not going to power through this and just say, no, if it gets down to it, we're just going to wave the white flag on the season. Entirely understandable, but you have to think, Greg, that their financial partners, television and other media entities are not going to be happy if something happens to the playoffs.
No.
I would love to see it because I'm a fan of chaos when it comes to college football.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I would think Cincinnati win the national title and not play a game. That would be hilarious.
Well, what's funny about that? First of all, that nobody wants to see that. But
no, I am being slightly facetious when I do say that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But but it wasn't all that long ago where we would all talk about the mythical national championship.
Yes,
but they didn't have a playoff.
Yes.
You just had you play the season out, and whoever was number one at the end of the year with the coach's poll was number one.
Yep, and we have split titles, and we have schools claiming all kinds of bizarre national titles from back in the day.
You had all the New Year's Day bowls, and you had the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl, and all these bowls played on New Year's Day.
Yep,
they weren't playoff games; they were just big bowl games, and typically the national champion. I use that in quotation marks. You usually would play in one of those games because okay.
Yeah, you would have the very very rare outlier like Brigham Young, I think in 1984 when they played Michigan in the What the hell game was it? It was the Holiday Bowl. It was the Holiday Bowl. Yeah.
And but. So it's not unprecedented to just say, okay.
Yeah, here's our champion.
But now you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Now that you've released this playoff genie, you can't put that back in the bottle. And nobody wants to see have different schools claim that they're the national champion. I don't know who would be able to lay claim to that.
I'm just laughing, thinking that there'd be. Let's think if all 4 teams can't compete, all 4 teams could claim a national championship.
A quarter of a championship.
A quarter of a championship. Oh my, yeah.
You have 4 different flags raised up in 4 different stadiums next year.
Hey, Michigan is claimed a few questionable national titles. What's one more? So.
Well, you know what I don't understand now. What's the reasoning? Have you heard what the reasoning is behind not postponing the games, and why are they so?
I have not really heard much about as to why they won't postpone them. I really don't know. I have not been able to really seen anything as to why they won't. Why it's just a forfeit rather than.
I mean, the last games of the year. I don't know what. It's not. They're not holding up anything.
Yeah.
These games aren't holding up anything else. I don't know why there's this reluctance to just say, okay, we'll just cool it. We'll give it 2 weeks or give it a week or something. I don't know what the big deal is.
Because they would throw out academics. Yeah, bullshit. Oh, they would have to miss extra school because of that. Oh, they miss a ton of school as it is right now. So, yeah, but my reasoning my guess would be something like that. We don't want to interfere with the next semester of school or some BS like that.
Well, I think
still
it's more
trying
likely
to play the academics card.
Well, the people that are traveling to see these games,
they're boned.
Well, they've bought airline tickets, they've made hotel reservations, they've taken time off work, built around with the intention of going to see these games.
Right.
So, I mean, that would be surely would be an inconvenience. I'm not saying there wouldn't be an inconvenience involved.
Yeah.
But I still think that, I think that is outweighed by the importance of wanting to crown a champion.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking 2 games, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, 3 games.
Three games.
The 2 semifinals So there's 3 games you have to. Well, maybe I'm making it sound easier than it really is, but I just think that to just flat out say we're not going to postpone any games for no matter what, which it sounds like what you're saying that they're saying.
Yeah, from what I've read, yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah, it's well, let me add, since we're talking about bowl games, I kind of forgot to put this in the show notes. Where do you stand on players sitting out games? Because there's a lot of controversy. I think more so from the fans.
Games?
What's that?
You mean healthy players sitting out games?
No, yeah. They say where I don't want to play because I want to prepare for the draft, or I'm pulling out because I'm worried about my health and I have this big contract coming up. Like Kenneth Walker, he pulled out weeks, right almost immediately after the season ended. He pulled out of the bowl game. So Pickett, the quarterback for Pittsburgh, has done the same. Both these guys are Heisman contenders. They were saying we're going to prepare for the draft. We're not going to the bowl game. Ohio State announced yesterday that 4 players are pulling out of the Rose Bowl, of all things, which would have been unthinkable 5 years ago, a decade ago. Would never have been feasible, but. I tend to. I saw what happened to Jake Butt, Michigan's tight end, was probably going to be at worst probably a 2nd round pick. He elected to play in the Orange Bowl, destroyed his knee, lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in draft status, and he was never the same player. And I believe he was out of the league before the end of his rookie contract. So. And he's on record saying, I would play the game every time, but he also is saying, he's also said, thinking back on it, I probably made the wrong decision. So I have, and it seems like the main people who seem to be upset about these players sitting out, especially these games that aren't the playoffs, seem to be the fans. And it's coming from a very, very selfish place for fans to say, well, we want you to play in this game for the team, and considering they aren't getting paid or they're getting paid very little through NIL rights, when you got coaches making millions, you got schools making tens of millions, you got the NCAA making billions, you got TV networks making billions off the backs of their labor. Right. So what gets so I'm just actually happy to see players realize it's a business. And you have to make a quote. Holly gets thrown about it's a business decision.
Yeah,
well, that's exactly what they're doing. Yeah. If you're involved in a bit. There's a line from the great book North Dallas 40. It's in the movie as well, where one of the players tells the coach, every time I say it's a business, you say it's a game. Every time I say it's a game, you say it's a business. And it took players a long, long time to figure this out, that college football is a business. They need to treat it as such, and they have to look out for their best interests at heart, because they have their entire future banking on them staying healthy. So it makes perfect sense for guys who are going to get drafted to sit out these games. And it just drives me crazy to see fans say, well, they should do it for the pride of their school and their teammates, where if you would ask them to make the same sacrifice, maybe then it would click into them. Oh, you're asking me that I may have to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of dollars just in case on that percentage I get hurt. No, I'm not going to take that risk. These players, we've seen we've talked about on the podcast, Greg, how we've seen coaches jump ship. Schools that are like Brian Kelly, whose team at the time was still in the running for the college playoffs, and he still bailed on his team because he got a $100 million contract. So for players to see that and then think to themselves, well, I need to be treating this as a business as well, and I have nothing against these players for sitting out games, especially, if a player wants to sit out a playoff game, I wouldn't blame them one bit. Just because of they need to think of themselves first. It shouldn't be about the school. It shouldn't be about the team. It needs to be, when you're at that level, it needs to be about yourself, because there's so much money at stake. And this do it for the team is just, I find it laughable when there's so much money being thrown around and these guys see such a tiny amount of it.
All of those entities that you mentioned that make all that money, are going to make that money regardless of these players playing these games.
Yeah, we're seeing if these flea bag bowls are getting huge ratings.
It's not like player A over here, by deciding not to play in a particular game, is in any way, shape, or form taking money out of the mouths of anybody or food out of the mouths of anybody. Because all those things that you just said are making all this money are going to make all that money no matter who plays it. You could put a bunch of JV players out there. They're still going to make all that money.
Yeah. Aiden Hutchinson sits out for Michigan. That's not going to change the ratings one bit.
I know the Lions fans wouldn't mind if he sat out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But, yes, at that point, and here's the other thing too. It's one of the few things, Al, that these players have any control over.
Yeah,
really the only. I mean, when you think about all, you mentioned NIL and but it's one of the few things that they have, maybe the only thing they really can control, because at that point they become their own personal brand. Let's face it.
Yeah.
Let's face it. Not every player who plays in these bowl games, of course, is going to like to be drafted, at least in the first couple of rounds anyway, who are scheduled to play in these bowl games. So this is their chance now to finally make a decision that they can control, and nobody else can stop them. That's the beauty of it. Nobody can force them to play, of course. They're making a decision based on their own personal brand, which essentially they're on the clock. I mean, they're this close to being professional. Okay.
Yep.
So it's literally like, okay, this game is going to occur, or these games are going to occur, these playoff games, and when those are over, I'm done. I'm done with the college experience. So it makes sense if there is indeed that much money on the line. You gave an example, and you could sit there and say, well, geez, Al, you could get hurt in October against Wisconsin. I get it.
Yeah.
But you've come this far with not getting hurt, or with not suffering some sort of a debilitating injury. Why tempt fate when you've got all these millions of dollars dangling in front of you? And here's the other thing that's so ironic too about what you were saying about, why is it untoward for players to be thinking about money when everybody else is thinking about money?
Yeah.
Why should they be left out in the cold? I mean, you mentioned Brian Kelly. We were talking about this, I think, last time we were together.
Yeah.
About these lateral moves. You mentioned that Notre Dame is typically not a school where you move along. You move on from.
It's a destination job.
Right. Yeah. Destination, exactly.
Right.
Well, now we're seeing these Brian Kelly's of the world just making these lateral moves, and I don't mean lateral money-wise because they're getting paid more money,
right?
But lateral in terms of
prestige,
prestige, right? I mean, you know, to leave Notre Dame to go anywhere used to be unheard of,
right?
Unless you were fired, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just, why should the players be held to a different standard? Because they've gone through their entire college career, you know, being the golden goose, if you will, for everybody else. Mm-hmm. And now this is their time now to control their destiny, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so I'm with you. I think if it's disappointing, of course. I understand why I understand why the fans want to see each team put on the field the best possible personnel, of course. But these teams are at that level, not because of one guy or two guys, because they've got a lot of good players, and they should be able to overcome, you know, so-and-so sitting out, for example. I mean, it shouldn't be the end of the world if a guy like Aiden Hutchinson decides not to play. I mean, yes, it would definitely hurt for sure. And I mean, but who's to say that the guy that replaces him, who nobody's probably ever heard of, might go out and might have a big game himself?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of it.
In a lot of ways, that makes more sense for the teams anyway, because these guys are leaving would be leaving in one more game.
Right.
Play the backup who's going to be here next year and see how he does and get a head start on the next season. But, you know, and when I would see, and the argument that you say people make, well, why don't they just sit out that, you know, an October game against Maryland? You could make an argument that October game against Maryland is far more important because you're still playing for the Big Ten title. You're still trying to get to the Big Ten championship game. True. What does the Peach Bowl do for Michigan State other than get them on TV and you know, get the players a trip to I don't even know, where the hell is the Peach Bowl even played? Out in Carolina, Georgia. Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, that would make sense. Peach is Georgia, whatever. But but yeah, what? Whoever wins, who won the, like you asked a person, they should be playing the Peach Bowl. Ask them who won the Peach Bowl last year.
Right.
Hell if I know.
Right.
Who won the Rose Bowl last year? I don't remember. Anybody remembers who won the national title, and that is what the playoff has done. It has made. All it has done is essentially and this is what people wanted. This is the results of what people wanted, a definitive winner. As you talked about, for decades we just had a mythical national title. Sometimes that title was split, but it made the traditional big bowl games all relevant. Now fans, we want a definitive title. We want a definitive winner. Well, that now makes a lot of the bowl games you thought were so valuable afterthoughts, irrelevant, that, you know, just exhibitions. You know, this is that we're reaping what we sowed when it comes to the bowl games right now, and the players suddenly realizing that they should have more of a say in their health and how their future plays out. And if that means missing the Peach Bowl, more freaking power to them. That's what I say. So, but yeah, it's the straw man arguments you see get thrown out there from fans wanting players to play. When if you put them in the same situation, it might finally click in their little pea brains. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, that's why, you know, especially, and it makes the most sense, running backs. Christian McCaffrey is the guy who pretty much started this. Now, because running backs have only so many carries in their bodies before they start to decline, and their decline starts earlier than any other player you could think of.
For sure.
So a guy like Walker, I don't blame him one bit. I only got so many hits in this body. I'm not going to use up 30 of them in a meaningless bowl game. So, you know, and I could get hurt, cost me draft status, whatever. So, you know, it's the Pandora's box is open. As you said, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It is what it is at this point. And the only thing that could stop this, or at least make more of the bowl games relevant, expand the playoff field. Go to 8 or 12, 16. You know, hell, the Division 2, Division 3, they have full playoffs that come to a winner.
Right.
You know, and they just, for the most part, do the team with the better record gets the home game. You know,
right.
But they've been doing playoffs for decades. All of a sudden, you know, it's a moral crisis now. We're at the Division 1 level. So, oh God, I don't know. Oh, all right. With that rant out of here, I had to get that off my chest, Greg. I was going to say question 2 of the birthday game, but I got my TV dinner's coming. So,
yep.
You want to talk to Lions? You want to talk Tigers?
Let's go Lions right now. We may as well continue the football.
Do we have to?
Oh, John Madden's this guy, by the way.
That's the last time we talked, Greg. The Lions were.
Let me just jump in here. Breaking
go
news.
ahead.
John Madden has passed away.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my!
Age 85. And didn't they just run a John
Christmas
Madden
Day?
Special?
They ran that documentary.
Yeah, he has passed away at age 85. So that's breaking news, unfortunately.
And that was something because I didn't get to see all of it because obviously it's a holiday and I was doing things on Christmas Day. But what little I did see of it, I think it's sitting on my DVR right now, is that he was retired from coaching at age 42.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, and he was in the league a decade. He was hired at 32, out of the league at 42, right. And then the guy he did it right. He never had a decline. He always had a winning record.
Right.
He won big. He always won big. He won the Super Bowl. And then obviously he became an absolute merchandising monster. He between the Madden video games and obviously working for Fox all those years as a CBS and Fox as a broadcaster, and it seems like especially back in the 80s and 90s, every time you'd open up a magazine or see or turn on your TV, there was John Madden pitching something. The guy, he was brilliant. He really was, and it really is a shocker, because.
Yeah,
I never realized. I never thought of him being that old for whatever reason.
Well, I knew he was that old, but I hadn't heard anything about him being sick or anything. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if he passed away suddenly or what. But that was that's on Twitter. Just came on.
Yeah, rest in peace, John Madden. He was a deserved Hall of Famer for many reasons.
Of course.
So
yeah.
All right. With that, let's move on to the Detroit Lions and more NFL talk. Since we last spoke, Greg, it was like a month ago at this point. We was into our last show. That was right after Turkey Day, and that was an absolute debacle. We all remember how awful that game was. Well, since that point, they're 2-2. They've actually looked like an NFL team over the last month. They had a walk-off win over the Vikings on a last play touchdown pass with a Jared Goff to was it the Sun God? I think it was the Sun God that caught that pass. Amon Rod. But they've also they had a shocking blowout victory a couple weeks ago over the then league-leading Cardinals. I mean, that game was over at halftime, damn near. The Lions literally dominated the Cardinals that entire game. It was actually a pretty shocking game to watch. But since those two games have thrown a monkey wrench into the draft order, they're 2-12-1 now. They're second overall behind the 2-13 Jaguars. They're pretty much locked into a top 5 draft pick, but one more loss I think ensures they'll pick in the top 2. At this point, I'm not going to get too uptight over number 1, number 2, or whatever, because there's not like there's a Trevor Lawrence sitting up there for the picking at the top of the draft at this time. There's a handful of guys like Hutchinson and Thibodeau who are essentially 1A, 1B, 1C, or whatever. So I don't think that makes that much of a difference. Right. But regardless, though, Greg, I think over the past month, the Lions, and like I said, they lost Sunday. They lost to the Falcons on Sunday, 20-14, and they did that with Tim Boyle under center because Jared Goff is in the COVID protocols. But they have actually looked like I don't want to. Should I use the word competent, or maybe should I use the word? They look like a run-of-the-mill bad NFL team rather than a historically bad team like they were there for a few weeks, like in September, October. So, and I guess I got to give some credit to Dan Campbell, who we have pondered should he be on the hot seat or not. As say what you will about what's going on with the coaching staff about him still making play calls and essentially making his offensive coordinator relevant and will be gone at the end of the year. And some of you could argue about his aggressiveness, which I'm fine with, but some people don't seem to don't like. The team is continuing to play hard. They are not, as the season's going on, they are not getting blown out of games, and they have been decimated by injuries. They've been decimated by COVID, and they've had a pretty darn tough schedule overall. It's They're still a bad team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But at the very least, they're starting to look semi-competent. And considering how they looked 8 weeks ago, that's quite the accomplishment.
You know, I have to, I guess, eat a little bit of crow because I ranted here, I think last time we were together, actually, about Campbell and the Lions. I thought who were going to go 0-16-1.
We were both pretty much at that point.
I wrote,
but now your prediction might come true now. You predicted 3
I wrote
wins.
a piece. I wrote a piece about that's true about that, and I wrote that the Lions were going to have an 0-16-1 coach, and they were going to have to make a decision, and I'm got egg all over my face. But yeah, I mean, I suppose you got to give them some credit because they did dismantle the Cardinals, although the Cardinals are reeling right now.
Yeah, they've lost 3 in a row. They look human all of a sudden, very human.
Right. They did play well against the Cardinals. They did make a play at the end of the game against the Vikings to get their first win.
Yep.
They did come within, a whisker of maybe beating the Falcons when the Falcons had playoff hopes.
Amazingly enough, that the Falcons maybe they're a 7-win team and still trying to figure out how they've done it.
Yeah, I mean, the Falcons
which goes to show just how hard it is to go winless in the NFL.
Right.
When you got a team like the Falcons winning 7.
But here's the thing. You got a team that makes a turnover like the Falcons did.
Yep.
I think it was Gage with their own 36.
Yep.
And that looked like that was going to be the play that essentially lost that game for them. But the Lions make their turnover at the last moment. Kind of like last turnover loses the game kind of a thing. So there's always going to be – they usually are going to be the ones, they mean the Lions, are usually going to be the ones that are going to make that one more mistake than the other team. Now, for whatever reason, the National Football Observers have latched on to Dan Campbell for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. They really think that this guy has got what it takes to be – a winner, and just wait. And this isn't just Detroit people. These are people from all over that I've seen on Twitter. Give Dan Campbell some talent and let's see what he can do. And they're playing hard for him. Now, I will say what it has been a positive comparison was what happened with Urban Meyer in Jacksonville and that poisonous culture there.
Yeah.
The poisonous culture that, Matt Patricia had here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You take those two things and you look at Campbell, and as much as I hate to admit it, he seemingly hasn't had any issues with players. Okay, now he's got this Anthony Lynn thing, which is, weird, and I'm sure Lynn's going to be gone at the end of this year, but that's been a little bit strange in terms of, I'm going to take over the play calling but I haven't heard any sort of rancor among the players that is toxic, or even Robert Saleh over in New York, who all the Lions fans wanted to be hired in Detroit, having his issues in New York. Nobody likes him in New York. Mm-hmm. Well, Campbell is the kind of guy that if you don't like him, it's not because he's poisonous. Mm-hmm. It's because you just don't like him. I mean, you don't like the decisions he makes, or you don't think he's got what it takes. Yeah. But I have to acknowledge that there don't seem to be any sort of issues on the team right now in terms of players acting out or being unhappy or being disrespected, or they don't like the coach, or the coach is an asshole. I'm not seeing that with Campbell. I have to admit that. Now, that's a good thing, of course, obviously. And obviously he is coming back. I mean, clearly he's going to be back. There's no question about that now, especially, But I'm certainly not sold on the guy. That's for damn sure. I mean, this guy, he's made. Now, earlier I had said to you, and I remember saying this to you, I said, I'm not seeing any personal growth out of Campbell as a coach. And I'm kind of going to backtrack on that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think I am starting to see him, he doesn't seem to be making the same egregious mistakes. His play calling has seemingly gotten better.
Yeah.
I think he did the right thing, frankly, in taking the field goal against Atlanta. I know some people criticized him for that, said that he should have gone for it on fourth down. He was going for it on fourth down all day. Why did he stop doing it at that point? I was okay with that decision. Now, it turned out that he was kind of vindicated by that because the Falcons turned the ball over inside their own territory. But even if they hadn't turned the ball over, I was okay with getting those 3 points at that time. I think it was like 2.5 minutes to go.
And that was his reason. He says, I believed my defense was going to stop them.
Yeah, they really had. Now, the problem that I had in earlier games, like against Cleveland, for example, when he did punt the ball away and gave the ball right back into Nick Chubb's hands, and that was, Katie barred the door on that one. I thought that was a silly move. But this field goal late in the game against Atlanta, I was okay with. Now, had he decided to go for it, I just think that maybe it was time to. I think he'd gone to the fourth down well a little. Sometimes you go to that well once too often. I was okay with taking the points, and then like he said, let the defense get the ball back and see what happens. Obviously, though, you're working with a guy like Tim Boyle, who admittedly played okay. I mean, he wasn't the train wreck he was in Cleveland. He played okay. He just wasn't. He just made the mistake at the end of the game, of course. But he's still what he is. He is what he is. But the fact that they almost won a game with Tim Boyle at quarterback, I don't know if that says more about the Lions or it says more about the Falcons. But Falcons were playing for something. They were still on the fringes of the playoff race. So, and they were on the road and so forth. But Campbell. Hey, I'm not. My feelings aren't hurt about this. If he comes back and that's fine. Give him some more talent. We'll see. It just seems to be like he seems to be a breath of fresh air to the rest of the league observers. I think they kind of like his, unfiltered way of conducting himself.
Right.
And now whether that will translate into wins and losses, I don't know. But hey, I mean, they've been okay. I mean, they've been okay lately. But I'm still not sold on the guy, and I don't think anybody else should, frankly. I mean, you're 2-12-1. Nobody should be sold on 2-12-1. But we'll see what the draft holds. We'll see what Amon-Ra St. Brown, seems to be emphasis on seems to be a find in the fourth round, but. Show me again. Let's see. Let's do it again. Do it next year. Let's see it again. But if Amon-Ra St. Brown hadn't done what he's done, and they hadn't picked up Josh Reynolds, they might be winless because their receiving core was a disaster before Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of. And Cephas got hurt. I get it, but Amon-Ra St. Brown came on like gangbusters, and Josh. Reynolds has been a big time boost for them as well, and so is this running back Craig Reynolds.
The
other Reynolds.
Yeah, I mean, my God, a 100-yard rushing game out of him, and the Lions are probably going to have their best yards per carry since Barry Sanders was still playing with the Lions. So some of these things are starting to shape up, at least looking a little better. Today's, I don't know if you want to call it a controversy, but today's topic du jour, Greg, seemed to be Jared Goff getting the proverbial vote of confidence. And that, obviously, we mentioned earlier, Goff sat out Sunday's loss to the Falcons due to COVID and placed by Tim Boyle. And Boyle was okay. He played a lot better than he did against Cleveland, for example. But you brought it up. You throw an awful interception to end the game and essentially seal it for the Falcons. But this week, during his weekly radio interview, Dan Campbell, when asked about Goff possibly being the Lions' long-term QB, that was long-term was what they were asked. Dan Campbell said, "quote I don't see why not." And obviously, he then went on further to, say he was, fully behind his starting quarterback, the usual stuff. And the fan base and media seemed to jump all over the quote and posting articles on every place. Every media place had the Free Press and the news and the fan sites and all the social media places had something about this today. And it really isn't much ado about nothing. One, Goff contract, and sure, he's not going anywhere next year because of the dead cap he would cause. Goff is going to be here, starter or not, whatever happens. Goff is going to be on the roster next year. So one, he's not going anywhere. Yet we also know this is, I'm sure we'll talk about this later on in the year, next year I should say, but the upcoming draft and free agency are pretty underwhelming when it comes to quarterbacks right now. That could change when we see, when the combines and all-star games roll around and the Lions may fall in love with a quarterback. We'll have to wait and see. But as of right now, there's no lights-out prospect at the QB position. And third, why would Campbell say anything else anyway?
Right.
What would you expect your head coach to say when asked about the future of his starting quarterback, other than to say, I fully support him and he's my quarterback till something changes? Nothing's going to change anytime soon. So why would he throw Goff under the bus and say, no, I don't see him being he's a bridge quarterback and he's gone after next year, and we're going to draft. Why would you even talk about your strategy anyway? Of course this is what he's going to say.
Right.
So, and it's not like Goff has been bad over the last month. His last 4 games, he's got a 105 passer rating. He's got a touchdown interception ratio of 9-2. And he's actually played pretty okay. He's played okay. He's played like a average NFL starting quarterback, which I think that's what we thought we were getting when the Lions traded for him to begin with. So. But to make this into some sort of referendum or saying that, oh, my God, he's coming back, or yes, he's coming back, when it was going to happen anyway. I just found this whole kerfuffle or it being brought up, it was a slow news day, so everybody had to jump all over it, and that's one of the reasons why today's media landscape tends to drive me batty, because stuff like this becomes news when it's nothing.
Yeah, no, everything you just said was dead on. I mean, that is exactly what else was he going to say, Campbell? Mm-hmm. Of course, the Lions' strategy going forward at quarterback is probably yet to be determined, and I don't blame them, frankly. Yeah, but they don't have to determine it right now. They don't have to stick their, draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this is it for Jared Goff, and we're going to move on. Yeah. They have flexibility there. The guy is signed. He's not a free agent. He's signed.
And actually, if he kicks ass next year, he's still under contract. So
right. Yeah. It's not, and as you mentioned, it's not a banner. Or they say it's not a banner year for quarterbacks in 2022. And okay, I mean, the Lions I have said it a million times. They've got 5 draft picks over the next 3 drafts, their own, and 2 each in the next 2 years. So they got 5 first-round draft picks in the next 3 years if they don't trade them. And that's a lot of draft capital. I don't care where you draft it. I don't care if the picks are low or high. That's still 5 first-rounders over the next 3 drafts.
Right.
And you can make, if you do it right, that's a lot. You can bring in a lot of good people. The quarterback situation that'll take care of itself. I know it sounds crazy to say that because that's the most important position on the team, but really it's true. I mean, the way that this whole thing has been set up with Goff coming to Detroit, being locked up in a contract for a couple of years, Lions can it's almost like you can kind of take him for a test drive. This is really kind of this is a good thing for the Lions because it really is almost kind of good that there isn't a banner quarterback in 2022 coming out of the draft, because what they can do now is give Goff, just take Goff out for a test drive for a couple of years and then make their decision whether or not they feel like this is, and they can still draft a guy can still draft a quarterback.
They do need to draft somebody, though. They really do. They haven't taken a legit prospect from Stafford over 10 years ago.
Well, not only that, Alan. I've said this a million times. You have to have. We were just talking a little while ago about Boyle. Mm-hmm. In this day and age, it's not good enough to have a starting quarterback and then a guy that nobody's ever heard of.
A guy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You have to have any more, especially, and even this goes for every team, not just the playoff contenders, but it goes for every team. A competent, seasoned backup. And I know that is a funny position to pay a lot of money to. It's kind of like vice president of the United States. It can be a do-nothing position, but at the same time, if God forbid something were to happen, you want to have somebody who can come in and be competent. And this is what we've seen the last few years. When it started in 2019 when Stafford broke his back, and they brought in a bunch of clowns to play quarterback. It was a joke. And now the Lions have, after Goff, they have Blau and they have Boyle. And Boyle and Blau combined aren't really a good backup quarterback. So I know they in the past they've brought in guys like Chase Daniels and so forth, but you need someone. And I'm not dissing on Chase Daniels. I don't mean to do that.
No, but he was definitely overpaid. And you're thinking someone like Sean Hill, like they had back in the day, or Dave Craig, for example.
Right,
yes.
Exactly. Gus Frerotte they had one year.
Yeah,
You know, guys who've been there, done that. You know, Frank Reich one year they had.
Yeah, right.
Guys who've been there, done that, and you know, because these quarterbacks, I mean, they get hurt, and you know, you just have to have somebody to step in. I don't, you know, although having said that now, I don't know who having just said that, I couldn't tell you who the backup quarterback.
Yeah, but you're right though. If you have a team that's going to compete, you think it's going to compete for playoffs, you got to go in with a decent backup because how often does a quarterback make it through a season without missing at least one game?
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and you know you mentioned a little while ago about when we talk about college football and about how those games in October against Maryland can be just as important. Okay, later on. Well, it's the same thing in the NFL. I mean, okay, let's say your starter goes down in an October game, 5th game of the year, and on the surface it may not seem like it's the most important game of the year, but if you're a contender for the playoffs, or you feel like that in these 17 games, every game is so important. Well, you don't want to start a Tim Boyle if you don't have to. I mean, for the Lions, maybe it was okay because they weren't going anywhere anyway. But
well, think about it though. What if they had a legit backup when Matthew Stafford had broken the finger in his throwing hand?
Right.
And that literally tanked a season where they could have made the playoffs.
Good point.
He was never the same player the rest of that year.
You know that is 100% correct. He had to play. Excuse me. He had to play through that injury, as you know.
Yep.
And why? Because they didn't have anybody capable, or at least they didn't feel like they had anybody.
Not nearly as good as.
They just
and not even a fraction as good as injured Stafford. And Stafford was not good when he was hurt.
So but the ironic thing, Al, about that Stafford thing was that he ended up playing as poorly as maybe a bad backup would have played.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Exactly,
I don't know. I don't know how they came out ahead in that whole scenario. I mean, other than just to say, well, this kid Stafford's tough, and boy, he goes out there and plays no matter what. Well, sometimes you don't want your quarterback to play no matter what. Sometimes you want to give him a chance to heal and have a decent, capable guy. You know, even if he doesn't win the games, if he at least goes in and gives you a shot at it, you do not go into an NFL game with a shot at really winning with Tim Boyle. You just don't. I mean, no disrespect to Tim, but he's just not. He is what he is.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, well, if we go into a God forbid we have to start this guy, we're a goose is cooked. And I don't know. You're bringing up of the Stafford finger thing is beautiful. That is a perfect example. And we don't notice it. And people don't notice it because they didn't bring a backup in. We all kind of forget the fact that he played through that, and it hindered him. He wasn't very good. I mean, obviously he wasn't. He was physically damaged, but we don't really think of that as a backup QB issue because we didn't see the backup play.
Right. Yeah.
So, but it was an indictment, and we'd have to go back in the Pro Football Reference to see who the backup even was back then. But it was an indictment on whoever the backup was that I think it was Schwartz at the time, decided that he didn't want to play the backup, that he thought he had a better chance with an injured, damaged Matthew Stafford than he had with a healthy backup.
Right, yeah. It's I mean, we saw with the mid-'90s Lions that Dave Craig essentially saved one of their seasons when Scott Mitchell got hurt. And Craig came in and played great football.
Yes, he did.
So it's if you think with the Lions right now, it's whatever. But if you got a competitive team, you think it's going to be able to make a run. Yeah, you need to have a legit backup, and it's probably worth paying a little extra for. So because I'm shocked when I see a quarterback able to play now 17 games, all 17 games. It's going to become rarer and rarer as the way between injuries and COVID and whatever else is going on in the world at the time. So, all right, before we move on for the Lions, we do need to talk about how the media and maybe some of the fan bases have been reacting to this little surge, this 2-2 record over the past month. It's more than a bit baffling by the reaction. You'd think the Lions were a playoff contender, not a bottom feeder, not a top 2 draft pick type team. Here, I found a few headlines from the Free Press. This from the last few days about the Lions. Detroit Lions Tim Boyle shows a little promise. He just needs more experience. Why Detroit Lions have a brighter future than the Bears and the Vikings. Don't let Detroit Lions' final play cover up the exciting creativity that kept it close. Good news for Lions. Wow. Campbell is developing, getting a young roster to do the same. That sounds like it's crazy. That's like it feels like the team PR is saying this is what we want you to write about, and they're doing it. Is there some things to be encouraged about the Lions? Yes, they are starting to play better, but they're still just a 2-win team with an unproven coaching staff. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be 2 years from now, and they have a 60-year history of making bad decisions. So seeing people give this franchise the benefit of the doubt, yes, we'll get, the people that are here now weren't the ones making the decision 10 years ago, but go back to ownership and they'll say, well, Sheila Ford Hamp wasn't the ownership. Yeah, but she's still goddamn Ford. And Sheila Ford was making the decisions for her mother. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. Martha was a figurehead. Sheila was essentially Sheila was the one essentially helping her mom to run the franchise. I think she was making most of the decisions. But regardless of that, remember the Dungeon of Doom comment from Jim Caldwell?
Yeah.
Where he thought the media was so tough on him.
Right.
What the hell is these leads we're seeing? These silver-tinted glasses view of the Detroit Lions about how everything is so much better. It's a 2-win team, for fuck's sake. I just can't. And there's a few of these writers I don't respect, and some I do that are coming up with this stuff. Like Dave Burkett, he's the beat writer for the Free Press. I respect what he's doing.
Yeah.
But one of these is his articles. The other ones are from their lame-ass columnists, Seidel and Monterez, who are just awful.
Right.
But you're right. Looking at these, it feels like they're not doing journalism.
No.
I hate to put it that way. They're not being journalists. They're being PR flacks when it comes to this kind of stuff. There's no analysis here. No. This is just happiness and light to help sell papers.
Well, the whole selling papers thing, that's I don't even know if that's even the case anymore because first of all, there aren't any papers.
All right, generate clicks and put it out.
But I had posted something on Twitter about this as well a week or so ago. I did the same thing you just did. I threw out some sample headlines and I said, and listening to you, by the way, read those headlines. To me, I thought it sounds like it sounds literally like you are.
This is from DetroitLions.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And oh my goodness gracious! Now, I don't know why this drives me so crazy. Well, the reason why it drives me crazy is because it's not objective.
Yeah.
It's not any sort of objectivity whatsoever.
It feels like they're afraid to lose their access, so we're just going to tread lightly.
I don't. Oh, there was. I think one of the ones that I saw that I posted was like Jared Goff finally finds the key that unlocks.
Yes, I remember that headline.
Like, come on, really? Dan Campbell wins a game, and some of these. Granted, some of these are more of a fan website. I get it, like Sideline Report and a couple of other ones. Campbell wins a game against the Cardinals, and he's like Don Shula now. He's like the greatest thing since one guy wrote, now I'm convinced the Lions made the right choice. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that was from Pride of Detroit. I remember that headline. Yeah.
Oh, my God. When you listen.
And that's a site that actually has access. They've got credentials.
It's disingenuous. It's embarrassing. It really is. Listening to you read those headlines was absolutely embarrassing. The fact that you were reading headlines from the major newspaper.
Yeah.
2 major newspaper websites in Detroit is embarrassing.
Yeah, a 2 newspaper town. Oh my God, it's an awful 2 newspaper town at this point.
But how do you explain it? I mean, I know you threw out the theory that afraid of losing their. I hope that's not the case.
I doubt that, but that's what it. Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't think it would be that, but I honestly don't know unless there's some sort of edict coming from above them saying we want you to. We don't want you to make our readership angry, so let's give them feel-good articles to read about. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it could be some sort of algorithmic thing where they're saying people read positive articles compared to critical articles. Maybe something like that. I don't know. But that goes against the tenets of journalism, which these guys are supposed to be journalists. This is not journalism. This is PR.
I think what we're seeing is a gradual, at least when it comes to sports, a gradual blurring of the line between these team websites and these fan-centric websites.
Yep, online-only fan sites, yeah.
Right, and these reputable, long-standing newspaper websites like the News and the Free Press. For whatever reason, we are seeing a blurring of the line where you can't tell one from the other anymore. Mm-hmm. And that is disconcerting, to say the very least. And I'm not suggesting that these guys go out there and do a hit piece on the Lions all the time, because that gets old too. I mean, you can't. I'm not suggesting now you go the other end of the spectrum and just write nothing but negative bitching all the time. But come on.
Yeah, don't go for full Drew Sharp, in other words.
But come on now. I mean, some of this stuff is just so. I guess what it maybe Al, for people like you and me who have grown up, and this could be a generational thing too, by the way. You and I growing up on people who were not like that. Whether you talk about Al Ackerman, even Ray Lane, guys like that on television, and Joe Falls and Jerry Green and George Puskas and Charlie Vincent and you name it, who weren't like that. They did not take that tack of that rah-rah, everything is peaches and cream thing. Maybe that's where you and I are coming from. Maybe the younger fan.
You might be onto something there, where maybe it doesn't bother the younger fan base. Right.
That's why I'm thinking some of this might be generational. And the only way to find out, of course, would be to talk to younger fans and see if they're as upset about this as we are.
Well, actually, I think if you go online, if you go onto Twitter, you go onto Reddit, you go into the comment sites of those fan sites, I think you do see a bit of a generational divide between people, say, 40 and older, who are not yet buying into what we're seeing from Dan Campbell and the Lions and what's going on, and from the younger fans who haven't been exposed to decades of ineptitude, and are willing to give the organization the benefit of the doubt and say, well, I like what they're doing, I think they're going to. No, they say, I think Dan Campbell, he's going to be their coach of the future, and they're doing good things, and I think they're going to be competing for maybe a playoff spot next year. And then you got the older you got the older fans essentially saying, we heard that in the 70s, we heard it in the 80s, we heard it in the 90s, we heard it in the aughts, and nothing has ever changed. Why should I expect it to change now? And I really do think it's a bit generational. You got the young fans in their teens and 20s, maybe their 30s, who tend, maybe they're less jaded, I guess it might be the best way to put it. We're jaded. We're cynical. we get easily pissed off at the Lions. And maybe you might be onto something where it's just generational, where maybe today's generation, the younger, I should say, generation of readers, it doesn't bother them or they don't care because they never had a legit newspapers in their lifetime. Essentially, the papers have been neutered for 20 years. When you think about it, their readership has been declining. Ever since Craigslist, essentially, because the newspapers, for a short history lesson, newspapers were little more than what their main thing was. They were a way to deliver classifieds to the public. That's where they made their money, through classified ads, through advertising. And once Craigslist came along and people said, oh, I can just post what I want to sell on a website for free. I don't have to pay the Detroit News or Free Press $30-$50 to put an ad in a Sunday paper that who knows we'll see. Oh, it's a done deal. And ever since then, the papers have been declining in revenue. Plus, they were very, very late in going into the paywall, where they gave away their news for free for decades. Now people expect news for free, and now that we're seeing paywalls, and I do pay the Free Press a month per month, so I get to see the paywalled articles. But I cut a deal. I pay a whole $1.50 a month to do it. I mean, they literally give it away if you give them a hard time. But yeah, I mean, we have a generation that that have seen nothing but neutered newspapers. They've seen cities go from there's a couple generations, Greg, that some cities had 3 or 4 or 5 newspapers, like New York City,
right? Probably
more. Detroit had 2 monster competing newspapers in the news and free press.
Yeah.
They literally, and we're both old enough to remember the joint operating agreement that essentially merged the manufacturing process, the publishing process, and essentially they became a joint business entity with 2 separate editorial offices. But it essentially killed the papers as competitive, as a competitive entity where they were competing for readership. They were the same company with just different editorial, and when you're not competing, you see what happens when there's no competition. The product gets bad, and that's exactly what's happened with the Detroit newspaper. That's what's happened with newspapers around the country. Now, we're still lucky in this city, Greg, in this area, that we have 2 large newspapers in Detroit. Most cities of Detroit size and bigger have 1. Seattle, Denver, Miami. Cities of that size, Atlanta, 1 newspaper nowadays, and these all used to be 2, 3 newspaper towns. So yeah, I think you might be onto something when it comes down to there's a couple generations at this point who don't expect much of anything from the journalists in town, and they'll read it if it's positive, and they won't read it if it's negative. I think you're really onto something here.
One of the things I like to do as a historian.
Oh, history lesson over.
No, but everything you said is pertinent. One of the things I like to do, one of my pastimes is I have a subscription to newspapers.com, and I use it almost entirely for sports-related research, because I find it fascinating to see how sports stories were reported on back in the day. Yeah. The way that how journalism was different, how headlines were different, and so forth. And just the other day, I was looking back at when Wayne Fonts fired Dan Henning in 1993, and
when Fonts was doing his firing a coordinator every year,
and Charlie Vincent wrote a column,
and he was the Lions beat writer at the time, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he was a beat writer.
Or was he a columnist at that point? He was always a Lions guy. Yeah,
he wrote a piece that just kind of took Fonts to task and said he's a hypocrite. He always says it's all about the team, and we're all in this together. And look what he's doing now. He's throwing Dan Henning under the bus, and then he took a shot at Fonts's drug.
The cocaine bust. Is essentially his son took the rap for.
Tried to throw his son under the bus, and then he retracted that when it was learned that his son doesn't even live in Michigan. Yeah. And Vincent went there. Now that was 6 years prior to this whole Dan Henning kerfuffle, and Vincent wrote a very unflattering. This was the morning after the decision was made. Very unflattering take on Fonts and how he was a hypocrite. And by the way, this isn't the first time he's tried. And then he went to a low blow with the drug thing, which had been 6 years prior to that. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, would such an article have been written in 2021? No, absolutely not. Well,
look at how the Matt Patricia rape indictment was covered.
Well, yeah, that
Patricia never should have been hired, and once that came out, he should have been fired.
Yeah.
And it was also, what's obvious, all the coverage was not coming from the sports department. Right. It was coming from the news department.
Which is never good. That's never good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the thing is that, but to use a parallel thing that happened with Campbell was when he took the play calling duties away from, and that's why, that's what it was now, because I had seen something on Twitter about, somebody posted an article about Campbell saying, I'm gonna be calling the plays the rest of the season. I'm feeling better about it. I feel comfortable. And somebody else commented, well, this could be, which was a good comment, said, well, could this potentially have some offensive coordinators shy away from the Lions if they see that Campbell's the kind of guy that if he doesn't like the way things are going, he's just going to take the. And I said, well, that's a legitimate concern. And I mentioned the Dan Henning thing, which then caused me to look up the date. So that's how the Dan Henning thing happened. Yeah. So we have a similar situation with Anthony Lynn now.
Yeah, who's been neutered, he's just there.
But do you remember anyone in the Detroit sports media coming out against Campbell? I mean, taking Campbell, not necessarily calling him a hypocrite. I'm not saying that. But do you remember anybody coming out after that decision was made and like, what the hell is Dan Campbell doing? No. It was treated very matter-of-factly. It was almost like they made Anthony Lynn out to be
incompetent.
Yeah, and there wasn't any sort of what is Dan Campbell, even when it was very apparent the first couple games that Campbell took over the play calling duties that he was no better than Lynn.
He didn't know what the hell he was doing. Yeah.
And there still wasn't any sort of pushback by the Detroit media like, what is Dan Campbell doing? It was all about Anthony Lynn's future has been determined, and which is true, but they didn't say anything about
no pushback.
Right. So then I look at what Charlie. This is 1993. It wasn't ages ago. What he wrote about Wayne Fonts making Dan Henning the scapegoat. Vincent had nothing. He would have none of that. He just raked him over the coals for it, and that's what I'm talking about. You don't have to be an asshole just to be an asshole, which is what Drew Sharp used to do sometimes. You mentioned Drew Sharp. Yep. But you have to have some sort of basis on which to kind of take that edgy. I was very impressed by that take that Vincent had. It was a very impressive take. And they interviewed a lot of the players, and everybody was like, I can't believe this is. They were all in shock, and they weren't sure how to process it. And it was also at the same time he demoted Rodney Peete to number 3 and brought Eric Kramer to number 1, and there's a lot of going on in that. Dave Levy became the play caller. A lot of stuff was going on there late in the year, and I've always looked at it as that it was something that Wayne felt that he needed to do, so he did it. But after reading Vincent's column, I kind of took a second look at it and said, well, maybe Fonts was a little bit, because I was reading kind of what Dan Henning had to say, and that what Fonts was saying and Charlie Vincent was saying, well, if you had a problem with what Dan Henning was doing, why didn't you just tell Dan Henning about it? And they said that Henning didn't have a lot of input on the personnel packages. And so when you started to dig into it a little bit more, it was a little bit more than just Wayne Fonts making what I thought was kind of a gutsy move. I'm looking back on it now, thanks to newspapers.com, and maybe it wasn't so gutsy. Maybe it was more cowardice than it was gutsy, because Wayne didn't really take any sort of he made the decision to fire him, but he didn't wasn't any sort of accountability, like, I'm the guy, buck stops with me. It was kind of like the buck stops with my OC. And that's what to me it's fascinating to look back on stories with a second look and to see the kind of journalism that was practiced back then versus what we're seeing now.
Yeah, and we've talked about DetroitLions.com. It still bothers me some to see Mike O'Hara.
Yes. Who
covered the Detroit Lions for over 20 years at the Detroit News.
Yes.
And he's a legit guy he never really held his tongue. And I remember, I had no problems with him as a beat writer. I thought he was pretty nails on when it comes to his coverage.
He and Kurt Sylvester,
then he gets bought out at the News.
Yeah.
I would guess probably forcibly retired.
Right.
And he goes working for the Detroit Lions and puts out fluff pieces now.
Right.
I mean, more power to you that he's making a career. That Tim Twentyman's another one. He's another guy who was a beat writer for the News and ended up going for writing for DetroitLions.com. Or one of the former Pistons beat writers, Vince for the Free Press.
Vinny Goodwill?
What's it? No, not Vince. Not Vinny Goodwill. Vince Foster, I believe, who wrote for the who's the Pistons beat guy for the Free Press for several years. He's working for Platinum Entity, which is Tom Gorza's company. Putting out writing for that organization now. So, it's maybe that's playing into it too, where these guys are afraid to burn bridges, thinking, well, I could have a second career working for these large organizations, putting out puff pieces. There's all sorts. It's starting to bring out, why they're not doing what they should be doing. And there could be numerous reasons for it, like between the readership, between possible looking for a landing spot when their careers are over, to just being bad at their jobs. There's all going to be numerous reasons. But just remembering guys like Falls and Vincent and Puskas and Green and Mike Downey was another one. There was a ton of excellent writers in this town at one point, back when. Well, Detroit was at that point still a top 10 media market, where I think it's this area is number 14 or 15 now because we've lost so much population. But it's frustrating to see the Dungeon of Doom just be this. It looks like a fraternity pillow fight now, apparently. So, all right, before we wrap things up, Greg, we got to touch a little bit on the Lions. Unless there's anything else unless there's something else you want to talk about with the Lions, we can close out on the Tigers and MLB.
Sure.
All right, the Tigers, before we touch on the lockout, but there's nothing going on in baseball because there's a labor stoppage. There was a report from Buster Olney of ESPN saying the Tigers offered Carlos Correa a 10-year, $275 million deal before they ended up agreeing with how come I'm drawing a blank on their new shortstop?
Baez, Javi Baez.
Yeah, Javi Baez. We already settled with the 6-year, $160 million deal with Javi Baez, and seeing what the Rangers signed Dodgers shortstop Corey Seager to $325 million for 10 years, and Seager is not a good a player as Correa. This supposed offer by the Tigers, doesn't it kind of feel like they're saying, "Hey, we tried, we took a swing but we missed at the top free agent." And it really smells to me, Greg, like what they did when they offered an under-market contract extension to Max Scherzer the year before he went to free agency, the offseason before he went to free agency. And the Tigers made a piddly ass, what was it, 6-year, $140-something million deal when he hit free agency, and the Nationals ended up giving him $210 million. A lot of it's deferred, but he's going to get every bit of that $210 million, and now he's signed with the Dodgers for a massive amount of money. But this feels like the Tigers heard some of the criticisms about why did you shoot low when it came, of the 5 starting shortstops available, some people were saying he was number 5. Why did you get him when Correa is still out there, and really all it was going to cost you was money? And this, to me, feels like the Tigers' response to this was to leak this to a few guys in the media, saying, "Oh, well, we tried to. We made a legitimate offer." When in the end, that offer looks like it's going to be at least $100 million short. Going to be light, at least $125 million light. It should be about 75 to 100 million light. So it just feels like the Tigers threw this out there as a way of saying, well, we tried and we just couldn't come to an agreement with him, so we set our sights on a different player. When realistically, that was not. If that was their final offer, that I could see why Correa said that's insulting. Especially with what the Rangers did. So this feels so much like Scherzer, and that's another thing that kind of bothered me. I remember when this stuff with Scherzer went down, and a lot of people in the fan base took Scherzer as a traitor for not signing that deal and waiting to hit free agency, when as soon as he hit free agency, he ended up making $70 million more. So it's, I don't know, Greg. I'm happy the Tigers got a shortstop. This still feels like as we've been talking about PR, this is nothing but PR. That's all it is. It's PR. That's not a serious offer for Carrera.
I don't doubt for a second that this was leaked on purpose, number one, okay? And I also don't doubt for a second that the Tigers are banking that there's still that section of the fan base that looks at players
as overpaid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And will and that section of the fan base will say, well, gee whiz, but what they don't leak out is they don't leak out how much money they're making. I mean, the amount
they don't
of money
open the books. We don't know.
Big league teams, any sport, not just baseball, of course, the amount of money that these owners are making. Let's face it, nobody goes into a business without the intention of making money. So I'm not suggesting that they're not supposed to make money. But if we were all told what the ledgers were of these teams, you would look at that offer that you just talked about to Correa in a much different light, because it's like, I didn't know you had this much money in your coffers.
Yeah, and that is why we'll never see them open the books.
Of course not.
Yeah.
And so yet all these player salaries, of course, are public consumption and so forth. But wouldn't that change the perspective a little bit if you knew that the team has oodles and oodles and oodles of money, and then you look at this contract offer? Now, for the record, I'm still not unhappy with the signing of Baez, but let's just take that out of the equation. If you had the perspective of knowing what was in the coffers, then look at the offer. Now, it's still a handsome offer, but the perspective changes when, because these owners aren't going to these contracts, Al, do not send these owners to the poorhouse wearing a barrel. Okay.
Nope.
There's still lots and lots and lots and lots of money to be had. Okay, that's just the way it is. But yet people don't look at it that, and they know that. The Tigers aren't. They know that. They know that. Now that might have been a competitive offer 7, 8, 9 years ago, maybe, to somebody. But yeah, you're right. It's not. And I don't care. I don't want to hear anything about, well, they're overpaid. It's all about what the market will bear. And the owners started this, by the way. This all began way back in the mid '70s when that guy, can't remember his last name, Sid or Sad or Sud or somebody like that. The judge made that ruling that essentially unleashed.
It got rid of the reserve clause, where it essentially said you are not, because before that, you were literally tied to the organization that drafted you until they decided to let you go.
So now the
owners,
and
whatever they offered you as a contract, that was pretty much it.
So the owners then drove up their own market. Nobody held a gun to their heads and said, okay, sign Bert Campaneris for $2 million.
And those contracts, looking back, are just ridiculously small, which goes to show just how little baseball players were really getting paid before that.
But there was still a lot of money in comparison to what they had.
Yeah, because people were shocked at what Catfish Hunter got $1 million a year or something like that.
But it was a lot of money in comparison to what they had been making. But what I'm saying is,
$100,000 to a ball player was like, oh my God.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that the owners were the ones that inflated the market. Now, they tried to put the genie back in the bottle in the mid '80s, and they got caught
with collusion, the old collusion.
They got caught. Okay.
Yes, the Jack Morris wearing his fur store.
There's always going to be fans that look at athletes as professional athletes as being overpaid. Yeah. Yet they don't look at an actor who gets paid $50 million, well, a lot of times we don't know what actors are being paid to make movies. That's number one. Mm-hmm. But even when people do know what an actor is paid to make a movie, nobody squawks. Yet they'll complain about paying $12 for a box of popcorn. But they don't.
Yeah, but like what the cast of Friends was making $250,000 an episode.
They don't make the connection for whatever reason. Yeah. But in sports, they always make the connection. Oh, well, now our ticket prices are going to go up. Now our beers are going to go up. Now our
what? And that's the thing. Mike, the late Mike Ilitch, as much as for years he was a bad owner until he decided, well, I'm going to try and win, and then decided to spend money.
Yeah, right.
You know what? He outspent what this market could realistically cover when it came to attendance and TV ratings wise. But guess what? The Ilitches are still billionaires for all that money Mike Ilitch spent. Which says volumes. Or another example, William Clay Ford bought the Lions for $6 million, in 1963. That they are worth they're worth over $1 billion now, and if they were a good organization, they'd probably be worth $2 billion or more. So there's a reason why you see guys like Tom Gores buy into pro sports because they know the money is there and they're going to make money. I mean, Tom Gores bought the Pistons.
I don't know what he paid for them.
He bought the Pistons cheap.
Yeah,
they were pretty much given away compared to what the franchises are going for. And
Karen Davidson wanted out, and
she wanted out, and she was willing to give whatever.
And there were not a lot of suitors. I know that Ilitch was rumored to have been a suitor. I don't know how serious he was about buying the Pistons, but there weren't a lot of. When you think back on that time frame, there weren't a lot of names that were thrown out there as potential Pistons buyers.
Right.
And she wanted out in the worst way. So
the Pistons were in stasis for like 2 seasons.
Right.
Because they weren't spending any money.
Correct. And so I understand, I can see why you would say that Gores got the Pistons on the cheap. I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
I don't know what
he got the Palace and he got the whole organization to go with it.
Right.
Yeah. But it's this is kind of talking into the current labor stoppage as well, that there's no negotiations going on. And one of the big arguments thrown out there by the owners is, well, we've lost money, or we're going to lose money, or we took a big hit in the pocketbook during the COVID season. Not mentioning that they were making money hand over fist for the previous decade prior. Or they're saying, well, we lost some money. But since they don't open the books, does that mean, well, they lost what they were projected to make and still made a profit? Which is probably the more likely conclusion than saying, oh, we lost money. Yeah, or you did it by accounting where you were able to say, well, we lost money, but you were able to counterbalance that with tax write-offs and maintenance with your stadiums and who knows whatever else. But yeah, this all really comes down to, because there's no negotiations going on at all at the moment. They're going to probably wait till there's a little more gun to both heads when we get closer to spring training. But when the ownership refuses to open the books or even be factual as to what their true revenues are, I don't blame the players one bit for wanting changes when it comes to free agency and how contracts are game when it comes to service time and arbitration and some of these things that the owners are throwing out there, like, we'll just make everybody a free agent when they hit the age 29. So what happens if if you make the team at 18? That means that you can't become a free agent for over 10 years. That makes no. Some of the stuff they're throwing out there are very anti-labor, very anti-player, and I just hope that the players are able to stay united as a group, because when you look at what's going on right now, the vast majority of players are getting underpaid. That as they say, the middle class. The teams are spending big money on that one or two superstars, and then the vast majority of the team, they're hoping anyway, is going to be a bunch of guys who are just on their first contract out of the minors, and they'll have under team control for the next 7-8 years. And then you got this whole massive bunch who used to make some pretty big money back in the day, like a Jonathan Scope, for example. He produced a decade ago, two decades ago, a guy who put out his production was going to get probably a double-digit $1 million a year contract. But he literally got signed. He was like one of the few teams that would even take him on. He got essentially a prove-it deal that first year he was here in Detroit, and he earned a multi-year deal. And even that was only the next deal was only for 2 years, and it's only like $4 million a year or something like that. Those are the kind of players who are, I think, are very undervalued right now, and they're being undercut because owners will say, well, we use analytics, and analytics say you use cheap players on their first contract. And because you have them you have them under team control for several years, and you can underpay them until they hit free agency, and that essentially kneecaps those guys that are like 28 to 32, who are essentially that aren't superstars, that are your typical everyday major league ball player, and they're getting woefully underpaid considering what we believe baseball revenues tend to be. So yeah, I hope the players just stick together and take the ownership to the cleaners. Because I don't believe a damn thing that the ownership says at this point when it comes to their finances. There's a reason these guys are billionaires, because they do bad things to good people to make money. At least when you get to that level of money, you've probably done some pretty horrific things to make that money and to keep that money. So yeah, I'm 100% behind the players, and I hope they get the vast majority of things they ask for. Especially when it comes to free agency, when they can become free agents, and how service time is gained.
Yeah, then those are big sticking points. And the other thing too, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. You mentioned the middle class, and that's a good observation, by the way. The haves and the have-nots and so forth. Yeah, is how the minor leagues are treated and how the minor league players are treated. And
that's a great point.
That's been another one that's been kind of it kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, you would think that you would treat those guys as an investment.
Yeah.
Instead, Major League Baseball has always treated the minor league players as a burden.
Yeah, right.
They really have.
Right, and I know that what the owners like to do is they like to kind of like to be wolf in sheep's clothing when it comes to their purported care for the future of the game. I think they tend to try to put that onus on the players, or at least portray themselves as being, well, we're just looking out for the good of the game. If the players get what they want, excuse me, if the players get too much of what they want, that's going to damage the game somehow. And they never really ever say how that's going to damage the game, but it's supposedly going to damage the game somehow. Yet, meanwhile, there are all these kind of goofy rules changes that they're instituting that, of course, have nothing to do with salaries, of course, but that I think are probably more damaging to the game than anything the owners could come up with in terms of putting it on the blame on the players. Now, the problem, Al, is that in some ways neither side is a sympathetic side. Why? Right. Because there is so much money involved. We talk about the owners not being able to cry that they're in the poorhouse, but the players can't really either. I mean, I know that there's probably more money to be had for certain players, and I know I'm not suggesting that what they're standing on is not worthy of being stood on, but in the court of public opinion, this is not something that is both sides are looked at as losers. I mean, both sides are not losers. Both sides are looked at potentially as being the bad guys. Because why? Because they're holding the game hostage to the fans who want to see it. Now, the Tigers right now are on the upswing. The fans are excited. The last thing the fans want in Detroit is to see baseball in any way, shape, or form postponed when they feel like the team is on the rise. Okay, so there's a feeling that these two sides, these two very rich sides, are holding the game hostage. If you look at it in a more nuanced way, like you have been doing in your little spiel, you'll see that that it's not necessarily that way. That there really is some reason to get behind the players. And I know that for some people that's a bridge too far. They just can't seem to align. They don't want to align themselves with people that they feel like is the reason the reason why they pay $4 for a hot dog, $8 for a beer, $30 to park their car. It's funny how they can make that connection, but they can't make the connection why they spend $12 for a pop and a popcorn at the movie theater because Tom Hanks makes a bajillion movie. They can't make that connection, but they can make the connection between Miguel Cabrera making a lot of money and the price of their beer. It's a fascinating the way that they can draw that conclusion, but they can't draw it in other forms of entertainment. And as much as some people would like to not admit it. Sports, professional sports, and college sports, of course, is a form of entertainment. Let's face it. And there's a lot of money being now with all these gambling websites out there and apps. Gambling, every other commercial is for a gambling app anymore. There's even more money flying around. So, but I'm with you. We'll see how unified they are, the players. But I'm hoping that beyond hope that they will find some middle ground. I'm not suggesting the players get everything they want. That's not the way it works. That's not the way negotiations work. But I hope that both sides can find some sort of a middle ground where they're both happy enough to put their signatures on a contract.
Yeah, and the betting thing, which is another that is bringing so much money into all the sports leagues. And it's kind of laughable thinking that, Major League Baseball teams have betting partners now when, Pete Rose was banished from this planet for essentially the same stuff. So, things have changed, to say the very least. And that was done for the good of the game. Now it's for how much money can we make. Does the good of the game be damned? And that's essentially where we're standing with Major League ownership at this point. They will never get the benefit of the doubt from me, much like the Lions. So, all right, I guess we can wrap this up. We've been going for quite a while, as usual. So, who is your jerk of the week or the past few weeks?
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to go with a guy who I normally don't consider a jerk, but I think he was a jerk in this instance, and that's LeBron James. LeBron, I'm not sure if you've been following this. He posted apparently some sort of a meme. I'm not sure if it was on Instagram or Twitter, kind of suggesting that there was a blurred line between COVID and the flu and the common cold. And it kind of played into the hands of the anti-vax crowd. Yeah. Way more than it would have played in the hands of the pro-vax crowd, let's put it that way. And so Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who doesn't get nearly as much credit for being one of the most cerebral, level-headed, brilliant men of our lifetime, as far as I'm concerned, came out with a rebuke and said, "Look, you're better than this. You wield so much power, Mr. James, that for you to put something like this out was irresponsible." And I completely side with Jabbar on this one. I think that I didn't know that James had done that until I read.
Yeah, I'm with you. I heard something about it. I didn't know that he had been called out by someone like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was a very smart man.
Oh, incredibly smart. And so I know Bill Russell gets a lot of the press for being the symbol of blackism, when it comes to the black athlete, but Jabbar flies under the radar for whatever reason. And he was dead on with his rebuke of LeBron James, and I'm not sure how LeBron reacted to it, but Jabbar said it was a blow to his legacy, and those are strong words coming from one of the greatest, if not the greatest. As far as I'm concerned, he is the greatest player to ever play the game, Jabbar. To come out and say that about someone else who's one of the greatest players of the game, But I thought he was dead on. I thought Jabbar was completely dead on that one, and I thought James was dead wrong. So my jerk of the week is LeBron James.
That's a really good one, because I didn't know that he had been called out by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And sometimes when you see stuff like this from someone like LeBron James or other players, You can tell he didn't go to college, or he has not been exposed to.
That's a good point.
Unlike Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was forced to go to college for 4 seasons,
right?
Essentially get his degree. Right. But you can tell that with guys like Jabbar, and you mentioned Bill Russell. Those guys went to 4 years of school, and Jabbar. My God, I would not be surprised if I have to look it up. If he has gone further and gotten into academic areas, if you know what I'm saying, get a master's or something to that effect.
Right.
But yeah, it's I did hear about the James thing, and that's with it because essentially it comes off as ignorant, pure and simple, when you're just, so many people fancy themselves as epidemiologists anymore. And LeBron James is essentially doing that right now, and I'm glad someone with the reputation, as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar called them out, so that's a really good one. There's so many I could go with at this point. What I thought about was Cole Beasley, the wide receiver for the Bills, who has been a COVID denier, an anti-vaxxer. And I found out this week that he had been fined $100,000 by the NFL for violating various protocols and policies. And of course, he came down with COVID as well. So he's a blithering idiot. But I got to go with the Nets and Kyrie Irving. I mean, the Nets came off as this when this came out that Irving was going to refuse to get vaccinated, and which meant he couldn't play in New York City, and obviously he plays for the Nets, Brooklyn Nets. Yeah. So he couldn't play ball in New York City. He couldn't play, I believe, in L.A. or San Francisco. He couldn't play in Canada. So essentially he would be a part-time player. And the Nets were like, well, for team continuity, we don't think it's fair to the other players. We want he'd be him going in and out of the lineup, and the disruption it would cause would hurt team chemistry. They always throw that term chemistry out there. Well, all of a sudden, the Nets aren't playing as well. They've been hit by every other NBA team by COVID. And then they just backtrack on everything they said at the time, and they bring back Kyrie Irving. And he still can't play in all these places. He's still going to be a part-time player, but essentially their reasoning was why they're changing their tune was things change. That's essentially what they said. Things have changed. So my jerk of the week are the Nets for having no backbone, and for Kyrie Irving for being a long-standing idiot. We've known he's been an idiot for years. This is just another sign that he is a moron who has an outsized say in what happens with his team and in the NBA. So that's my jerk of the week.
Good one. Yeah, can't argue with that.
This pandemic is exhausting me, Greg. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this puppy up. So if you get out the thank yous and the social media and all that fun stuff.
Well, I want to remind everybody to check me out at my WordPress Out of Bounds blog every Monday. I've got a new post. Yes, please do that. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. I want to thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this nonsense every 2 weeks, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday night so gosh darn fun. We hope to bring some more guests. I hope to bring some more guests in the first quarter of 2022. I know we're going to bring back City Hall to talk about the Pistons' first half of the season.
That'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, hope to bring in some other people. I've reached out to a couple folks, and we'll see what we come up with in the first quarter of the year. But meanwhile, I want to wish everybody a happy New Year, a great, safe 2022, and to you as well, Big Al. Let's keep it going. Let's make everyone say, keep it going.
Yep, yeah, exactly. I'm still waiting for you to announce when you have your own Substack. So
my own what?
Your own Substack, your own email newsletter.
Oh.
No, that's the new blog nowadays.
Yeah.
You're old school. You still have a blog. They all have Substacks or email newsletters now. So, but yeah, thank you, Greg. It's been another fun year. This will be our last show of 2021. And it has been, this has helped keep me sane over the past couple of years doing this show. It gives me, because, I've been in quite a bit of isolation, especially compared to you. Often, especially during when things got bad, and I was literally here by myself for months at a time. So, being able to have this podcast to look forward to is, it helps keep you sane. So thank you. And also want to give a shout out to Bean. He's been quiet, so way to go, Bean. and of course, shout out to Linda, who is still working her ass off in the ER, but not for much longer because she has had her fill of idiots is going to get the hell out of the ER and transfer. I don't blame her one bit.
No.
There's too many idiots in the world, and most of them have been exposed during the last 2 years of this pandemic, as we've discussed on this podcast. But if you want to listen to the show, you can find us in all the usual places where podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. Any place podcasts are aggregated, just look up The Knee Jerks, look up Eno and Big Al, look up some combination of those. You will find the podcast. Please subscribe. Please click like. Please comment. Just put in a good word. And, of course, Greg says we are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. Find us on the social media. As always, there's always thekneejerks.net. That's the homepage. That's where you can right-click the podcast and download the MP3 to do what you will. All the show notes and links will be there as well. And I think that about covers it. So let's get the hell out of here as we're well over time again, as usual. So until 2 weeks from now, when maybe we'll have some more to discuss when it comes to the MLB lockout, and hopefully we won't be the world won't be on fire from COVID. We'll have to wait and see. I'm just curious to see how the next 2-3 weeks play out after Christmas. Right. So, but until that time, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.